As Barriss removed her helmet, the blistering corrupted Sith eyes remained focused on little Luke and Leia. The ex-Jedi paced around the twins, attempting to get answers out of them. Luke would respond to every question with another question, while Leia would respond with sarcasm unfitting for one of her age. When Barriss asked Luke where he was from, his response was snarky and irritating to the Inquisitor. He replied, "Where are you from?" Barriss turned her attention to little Leia and asked her who trained them, to which the little girl then stated, "Someone better than you, Laserbrain." Barriss was tempted to execute them right there. She was trained to interrogate adults or teenage Jedi, not infants. She was certain, however, that if she simply held them alive, the Jedi who watched over these younglings would arrive shortly. The Jedi were far too compassionate for one another to abandon such small children to the Empire. Barriss Offee promised the children that the one who watched over them would die, slowly and painfully. Despite their bravado, little Luke and Leia were terrified. The Inquisitor's prediction was confirmed accurately when the power to the facility rather suddenly cut out. She placed her helmet back on. The backup generators would flicker power into the room occasionally, though it seemed that they too had been sabotaged. Red light would flicker on the children, though quickly dip back into inky blackness. Barriss ignited her lightsaber. A red glow moved throughout the room as she waited on the Jedi's arrival. She stood alongside the twins, holding the single blade at their throats. She was looking towards the doorway in the cell instead of the ventilation shaft above her. She had only a split second to react when she felt the presence behind her suddenly. Barriss pulled her blade away from the children, moving it behind herself to deflect a blue lightsaber blade that nearly took her arm off. The scuffle between Ahsoka and Barriss didn't last very long. They wrestled each other on the ground, bumping and crashing into the various tables and pieces of equipment within the interrogation room, before the two engaged in a lightsaber clash, battling throughout the hallways. With the power flickering on and off, Barriss couldn't get a clear look at her old former friend. All she saw was a blue blade swinging around, a darkened figure that seemed to be a Togruta. She was so focused on getting a clear look at this intruder that she couldn't sense Ahsoka. Despite Ahsoka not having had to fight a Force user with her blade in many years, the Inquisitors were trained to hunt smaller, weaker Jedi, like Padawans or low-level knights at best. Ahsoka had grown up battling the likes of General Grievous, Asajj Ventress, and Maul, so she was not an easy challenge for Barriss. Barriss was not expecting these Force-sensitive children to have such a powerful master behind them. The sudden raw power and quick movements by Ahsoka were both unexpected and severely overwhelming, which is how Ahsoka was able to win this short encounter with who she thought at the moment was just a random Imperial Sith agent. As Ahsoka heard incoming stormtroopers, she realized that this fight had to end quickly, as she would risk capture. Ahsoka managed to get the upper hand on the Inquisitor, disarming and force pushing her down the hall. Barriss crashed upon a wall and was knocked out by the harsh impact. Before Ahsoka ran back to the interrogation room, she took hold of the fallen Inquisitor's lightsaber, placing it on her hip. The power continued to flicker back on. Luke and Leia seemed to completely ignore the mess that had just been caused. They clambered out of their seats after Ahsoka removed the restraints. They were relieved and tearful as they grabbed onto their caretaker. They explained that they were worried she might have gotten hurt. Ahsoka would promise them that she'd never let them be taken away, but she was also internally livid that they had left the house and gotten caught. She hugged them tightly. When they got back outside, Ahsoka helped her children down from the ventilation shaft she had entered and began to sneak her way outside the gate. The most obvious solution would be to lift the children with the Force over the walls, though she didn't want to expose them to any potential blaster fire. As she tried to plan a way out, however, she noticed stormtroopers appear from atop the wall, pointing their blasters down towards her. She had moved too slowly, and now the Empire had trapped her as well. An Imperial officer shouted for her to drop the lightsaber, and Ahsoka nearly did. However, they were all overtaken by the sound of A-Wing fighters zooming overhead, obliterating the walls and scattering the Imperial troops with their short-range missiles. Ahsoka pulled the children free of any debris or flames and quickly set out to make a break for safety. The small handful of A-Wings were set on by the small amount of TIE fighters that patrolled the planet. They were quickly annihilated by the red and white painted Belbalub 22 starfighter, appropriately renamed the Duchess. Ahsoka could sense something, a presence she had not felt since Naboo. Looking up into the sky, a smile graced her features as she pulled the children to safety. When Ahsoka ran off the base with the twins, Barriss Offee, the Inquisitor that Ahsoka had just bested, awoke from her unconsciousness and witnessed her escape in the distance. Barriss didn't get a good look on Ahsoka since she was too far away. When she ran off the perimeter, she felt a slight familiar presence but couldn't make who it was. The Togruta had gotten lucky. Ahsoka had grabbed most essentials from their home and was heading for the landing platform, making sure to keep the twins in sight. By the time they arrived, the Empire had mostly been dispatched. With minimal effort, Ahsoka powered on her dingy freighter, locked the children into their seats, and took off into the upper atmosphere. While Ahsoka moved off planet, she received coordinates from what her instincts told her were an old friend. Punching them in, she jumped into hyperspace, behind the rebel ships. The Tantive IV came into view, alongside another handful of escort craft, including more A-Wings. The kids asked where they were going, not exactly liking the situation they were in. Ahsoka quelled their fears, patting them on their heads and promising them that it was going to be okay. When they docked with the Corellian Corvette, Ahsoka led the children inside, where a familiar set of faces met them. Luke and Leia stood behind Ahsoka's legs, while they were walking into the ship's main hallway. Obi-Wan Kenobi, looking fairly older, and Bail Organa, who hadn't seemed to age too much, met them. Ahsoka bowed towards Bail and Obi-Wan in respect, thanking them for their assistance on Rada, and noting that it was good to see them again. Feeling her children's anxiety and sensing that Kenobi wanted to meet his former apprentice's children, Ahsoka squatted down and took her adopted children's hands, urging them forward. Kenobi fell to one knee with a friendly smile on his bearded face. He held both of his hands out for a friendly handshake, introducing himself.
Hello there, I'm Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Ahsoka placed her hands on her charger's shoulders to ease their conscience, chimed in.
He knew your parents, and he's an old friend of mine. He can use the Force, like us.
This seemed to calm the children's fears, and they reached out to shake Kenobi's hands. The group moved to the meeting room, and Ahsoka told the children that this is where she had adopted them so long ago. That seemed to make them happy, and they hugged their adopted mother, while they all took a seat to discuss what had happened in their time apart. Obi-Wan went into vague detail about the missions he had been undertaking. Ahsoka in the meantime allowed her children to demonstrate what they had learned. They showed it off by lifting up the very chairs that Kenobi and Bail sat on. Humorously, Kenobi had commended their progress. Ahsoka asked how they were able to find them. Bail would remark that they picked up transmissions of Force sensitives being found on Rada, and that an Inquisitor was dispatched to arrest them. They came as soon as possible, because Kenobi felt that Ahsoka had to be involved. Ahsoka would ask about the Inquisitors, as she never encountered one up until now. Obi-Wan would take on a dark look, and remark that they were the Jedi that the Empire had coerced to the dark side to serve them. They had been hunting down Jedi since the Empire's creation. Ahsoka looked saddened to hear that Jedi she might have known once were now puppets of the Emperor. Luke would regard the Inquisitor who captured him as stupid. Leia would tell him to shush humorously. Ahsoka placed an arm around either of the children, like a proud parent. Obi-Wan begun to see that perhaps leaving the children with Ahsoka was a wise decision. It was clear that they had been raised well, though his Jedi training still had him worried about the amount of attachment the twins would have. It was the same attachment Anakin had to his mother, Padme, and even Ahsoka, that he believed helped lead him down the path of the dark side. If Ahsoka was taken or hurt, he feared that Luke and Leia would give in to their anger or be manipulated by Palpatine. This would need to be discussed at a different time. For now, Bail had an offer of his own. He told Ahsoka about the rebellion and his dream to unite the people of the galaxy against the Empire. There were people fighting across the galaxy, including the meager forces he had mustered together, and he wanted to unite them under a common banner. General Kenobi was proving to be a great leader under the alias of Old Ben, and having another person like Kenobi would prove invaluable. Ahsoka pondered it and regarded the twins. She had a responsibility to them above all else. When the twins were of age to take care of themselves, she would see about helping out full-time. Luke and Leia immediately asked if they could join too. From their understanding, Obi-Wan got to blow up stormtroopers, and that sounded pretty fun to them. Ahsoka would chuckle and pull them a bit closer, gently chiding them as she said,
When you're older.
Bail Organa offered Ahsoka a position within the rebellion. She agreed to it. The exchange is similar to the one from the Ahsoka novel, Bail asked what he should call her if he can't call her Ahsoka by her name. He adds that she'll need a code name at the least, so she can deal with operatives like Old Ben, as he gestured. Ahsoka nodded, telling Bail that he can call her Fulcrum. This is the alias Ahsoka would end up using in the rebellion. Bail welcomed the Clone Wars veteran openly. Shortly after, aboard Ahsoka's dingy freighter, she used the 2 kyber crystals inside the Inquisitor lightsaber hilt she had taken from Barriss on Rada to purify them and construct her iconic dual white lightsabers. During training sessions when they were a bit older, the twins would each use one of her white lightsabers, while Ahsoka instructed them with Anakin's blue blade, until it was time for them to construct their own lightsabers once they were ready. Days later, after the incident on Rada, Barriss Offee reported her findings to her superior in person, the Grand Inquisitor. She stated that the Jedi who bested her on Rada was the caretaker of the 2 younglings she was interrogating. The Grand Inquisitor tasked Barriss with tracking down and finding these Jedi, explaining that the younglings could be converted to the dark side to be potential future Inquisitors. However, he did warn her not to fail, as she may face Lord Vader's wrath, as other Inquisitors have in the past. Eventually, Luke and Leia Skywalker had reached a mature enough age to where Ahsoka can begin educating them on what the Force truly was. It's around this time when their lightsaber training had begun. As Ahsoka explained to them how the Force worked, we get a similar moment from the one in A New Hope, where Obi-Wan told Luke about the Force. In this timeline, that happens much earlier in Luke's life, as well as Leia. A curious young Luke and Leia asked their mother what the Force truly is. The motherly Togruta sat them on her lap, as she held them closely.
Well, the Force is what gives us our powers. It's an energy field created by all living things, like you two.
Ahsoka proceeded to boop the children on the nose gently, with a playful smile. She continues,
It surrounds us and penetrates us. It binds the galaxy together.
Leia proceeded to ask if their dad had it too, to which Ahsoka responded with a nostalgic smile.
Yes, he did. Which reminds me.
She stood up and walked over to her travel bag across the room. Ahsoka took out the holocron that we saw her use in Rebels when showing Ezra who Anakin was. The holocron of Anakin's lightsaber technique played, and both Luke and Leia watched in awe. Little did they know that the same man they watched with intrigue would soon be the one hunting them down in due time. As we fast forward into this timeline, Luke and Leia were now around the age of 14, the same age that Ahsoka was when we first met her. For the past couple of years, the twins had been training with the 2 white lightsabers Ahsoka had. The time now came for them to obtain their own personal lightsaber. The first step they took was to get their hands on a kyber crystal. Weeks before this journey, Ahsoka informed Obi-Wan via a holotransmission as Fulcrum that the twins were ready for their first test. Kenobi, operating under the alias of Old Ben, tipped off Ahsoka on a potential unexplored sector on the planet Ilum that had no Imperial shipment activity for a certain amount of days. The last time Ahsoka was on Ilum was with Master Yoda during the gathering with a group of younglings. The small freighter landed in an open terrain, right in front of a cave entrance, surrounded by mountains piled with snow and ice. Inside the ship, Ahsoka explained to Luke and Leia that this will be their first test to become Padawans. The Skywalker children had been preparing for the past month. They were confident and eager to get their very own kyber crystal. Ahsoka hugged them and wished them well. Leia asked if she was coming along, to where Ahsoka responded that this is their journey, not hers, and that she couldn't help them. The now older Togruta told the children she'd be waiting in the ship when they returned. Luke and Leia bowed to their mother and set off to search for their crystals. The cave entrance had a vast outspread. The Skywalker twins walked through. As they walked deeper inside, they came across 2 different entrances that were much smaller. Leia noticed Luke's troubled expression. When she asked him what was wrong, he described that he wasn't sure if he could successfully pass this test. While they were both equals, Leia was more confident in her abilities than her brother. She didn't like seeing him dejected, so being the loving sister that she was, young Leia placed her small hand on Luke's shoulder, giving him a hug and words of encouragement. She told him that he will succeed and to trust the Force, as Ahsoka and Obi-Wan had always taught them. Luke smiled to his sister, nodding. They proceeded to go deeper in the cave. Luke and Leia spent around an hour roaming the depths of the cavern. The task was difficult and came with its trials and tribulations for the young Skywalkers. Leia was the first to find her crystal. The moment she heard it singing, she could feel its presence, the closer she got through the many pathways. Eventually, she stumbled upon her crystal. At the end of a tunnel, Leia saw it shine as it sung to her. The little girl's eyes lit up with relief and joy. She grabbed the crystal and placed it in her pouch. She continued roaming around in hopes of finding Luke. Elsewhere deep in the cave, Luke had been struggling to find his crystal. The little boy ran tirelessly throughout the cavern. He jumped through broken ice bridges, climbed rocks, until laying eyes on the green kyber crystal. Luke heard it sing to him, but he couldn't reach it. It was just too far. At the bottom of where Luke was, hanging onto, Leia appeared. She sensed Luke's fear and discomfort, so she called out to him with words of encouragement, cheering her brother on. It took a few moments, but after mustering the courage, little Luke took a leap of faith. He jumped towards where the crystal was mounted on the cave ceiling by holding onto a piece of rock and successfully retrieved it. He was fascinated by the green crystal up close as it shined brightly. Placing it in his pocket, Luke made his way down and was met by a hug from Leia. The two complimented and thanked each other as they made their way out. Ahsoka had stepped outside of the freighter. She began to worry as any mother or caretaker would. Before her anxiety could increase, she glanced closer at the cave entrance, seeing two small shadows. When little Luke and Leia appeared, they ran to Ahsoka with their crystals in hand, jumping joyfully and exclaiming to her that they did it. The empty valley was consumed by their cheerful shouts and laughter. Ahsoka kneeled down with her arms open. A delightful smile formed on the Togruta's face. The twins raced to her, which was met by a warm hug. Luke and Leia excitedly showed off their new kyber crystals to Ahsoka. She congratulated them as her orange hand touched their soft faces. Ahsoka was extremely proud. They all hugged each other tightly again for a bit. That felt like a euphoric lifetime. The twins took a slow step back as Ahsoka placed her hands on their shoulders. Her smile remained on her face as she would look at them directly in the eyes, telling them,
You would have made it as your father's Padawan, and I'm glad you'll make it as mine.
There was a short pause that felt like an eternity. Ahsoka absorbed every second of this moment. It brought her memories of nostalgia when she was a Padawan to Anakin. Shortly after, Luke and Leia would construct their very own lightsabers. Leia donned a white pinkish hilt that perfectly complemented the icy blue blade. Her brother's hilt had a basic lightsaber color palette that blended in well with his emerald green blade. The Skywalker twins had taken another step into following the footsteps of their mother and father, from a certain point of view that is. They set a course for hyperspace as more adventures and encounters awaited them on the horizon.